The courtroom held its breath as 12-year-old Jamal Carter stood, small but unyielding, his dark eyes locked on the judge. 3 words, sharp as a blade, hung in the air. I am enough. They weren't just words, they were a spark, igniting a firestorm that would unravel decades of buried truths in Willow Creek. Jamal wasn't supposed to be here. A week ago, he was just a kid riding his bike through the dusty streets of his small southern town, his laughter echoing past the sagging porches and cracked sidewalks. But that was before the incident, before the police cruiser screeched to a halt, before Officer Daniel Hargrove, a man with a badge and a grudge, yanked Jamal off his bike, accusing him of stealing it. The bike was his, a birthday gift from his mother, Lena, who'd saved for months to buy it. But to Hargrove, Jamal was just another black kid who didn't belong in the wealthier, whiter side of town. The arrest was swift, brutal, and public caught on a bystander's phone, the video spreading like wildfire, exposing the raw nerve of Willow Creek's racial divide. Now, Jamal stood in a courtroom that felt like a pressure cooker, every seat filled with townsfolk, some whispering support, others hissing venom. Lena sat behind him, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles paled. She'd fought for this moment, scraping together every penny for a lawyer, only to be told by the public defender to plead guilty and move on. But Lena refused. She knew her son knew his heart, his truth. And Jamal? He wasn't here to beg. He was here to fight. The judge, a grizzled man named Harold Grayson, leaned forward, his gavel untouched but looming like a threat. "Young man," he said, voice low, "you've got one chance to explain yourself. Choose your words carefully." The room stilled. Even the ceiling fans seemed to pause. Jamal's chest rose, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I am enough," he said again, louder this time, each syllable a defiance of the system that had already judged him guilty. The prosecutor, a slick attorney named Richard Wells, scoffed. He was a local hero to some, a man who'd built his career on keeping order in Willow Creek. To him, Jamal's case was simple. A kid caught where he shouldn't be, resisting arrest, stirring trouble. Wells adjusted his tie, his smirk barely concealed. "Your Honor, this boy's defiance is proof of his guilt. He's not a victim's a problem." The words landed like a slap, and Lena's breath hitched. A murmur rippled through the crowd, some nodding, others shaking their heads in disgust. But Jamal didn't flinch. He'd heard worse in the streets, at school, in the whispers that followed him and his mother wherever they went. Willow Creek was a town split down the middle, where the railroad tracks weren't just geography but a line between those who belonged and those who didn't. Jamal's family lived on the east side, where the houses were smaller, the streets rougher, and the dreams harder to hold on to. Lena worked 2 jobs cleaning houses by day, waitressing by night just to keep food on the table. Jamal helped where he could, delivering newspapers, mowing lawns, always with a smile that hid the weight he carried. The incident had started innocently enough. It was a Saturday, the kind of sticky summer day where the air clung to your skin. Jamal had been riding his bike to the library, a place he loved for its quiet and the promise of stories where kids like him could be heroes. He'd crossed the tracks, pedaling through the west side, where the houses had manicured lawns and American flags fluttered proudly. That's when Hargrove spotted him. The officer didn't ask questions. He saw a black kid in a white neighborhood and assumed the worst. The video showed it all. Hargrove's hand on Jamal's arm, the bike crashing to the ground, Jamal's voice cracking as he tried to explain. "It's mine. I didn't steal it." The officer's response was a shove, then cuffs, then a ride to the station while neighbors watched, some filming, others turning away. The video had sparked protests. The east side rallied, signs reading "Justice for Jamal," waving outside the courthouse. But the west side pushed back, calling it a misunderstanding, defending Hargrove as a good cop doing his job. Tensions boiled over at a town hall meeting, where shouts drowned out pleas for calm. Lena had stood at the microphone, her voice shaking but fierce. "My son is not a criminal. He's a child. When will you see him as one?" Her words were met with applause from some, jeers from others. The divide deepened, and Jamal's trial became the flashpoint. In the courtroom, Wells paced, building his case. He painted Jamal as a troublemaker, citing a school suspension from 2 years ago, a playground scuffle where Jamal had defended a friend. "This boy has a history of defiance," Wells said, holding up a file like a trophy. "He resists authority. He doesn't belong in our community." The word stung, but Jamal kept his eyes on the judge. Lena had taught him to stand tall, to never let anyone make him feel less than. She'd whispered it to him that morning. "You are enough, baby. Always." The defense lawyer, a young woman named Sarah Coleman, was out of her depth but determined. She'd taken the case pro bono, moved by the video and Lena's plea. Sarah stood, her voice steady but passionate. "Your Honor, Jamal Carter is a child, not a criminal. He was profiled, assaulted, and wrongfully arrested. This isn't about a bike, it's about a system that sees a black boy and assumes guilt." She pointed to the gallery, where East Side residents sat shoulder to shoulder. "This town is watching. The world is watching. Will you let prejudice win?" The judge's face was unreadable, but his eyes lingered on Jamal. Grayson had served on the bench for 30 years, presiding over countless cases in Willow Creek. He'd seen the town change: integration, protests, promises of progress that never quite took root. He knew the weight of this moment. "Mr. Carter," he said, "you've made a bold statement. Now tell me why. Why those 3 words?" Jamal swallowed, his voice small but clear. "Because that's what my mama taught me. She said no matter what anyone thinks, I'm enough. Not a thief, not a problem, just me." He glanced at Lena, who nodded, tears brimming. The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Even Wells paused, his smirk faltering. But the prosecutor recovered quickly. "Sentimental nonsense," he snapped, stepping forward. "This boy broke the law. He resisted arrest, caused a public disturbance. We can't let emotions cloud justice." He turned to the gallery, playing to the West Side crowd. "Willow Creek deserves order, not chaos. If we let this slide, what's next?" The words ignited the room. A man in the back shouted, "He's just a kid." Another voice countered, "He shouldn't have been there." The judge banged his gavel, silencing the crowd. "Enough!" Grayson's voice boomed. "This is a courtroom, not a circus." But the tension didn't dissipate, it hung like smoke, thick and suffocating. Sarah seized the moment. "Your Honor, let's talk about the real disturbance. Officer Hargrove's record shows 3 complaints of excessive force, all against black residents. Why isn't he on trial? Why is a child bearing the weight of this town's failures?" She placed the viral video on a screen, the footage grainy but undeniable. Hargrove's aggression, Jamal's fear, it was all there. The crowd gasped, some whispering, others glaring. Wells objected, calling the video inflammatory, but Grayson allowed it, his expression grim. As the footage played, Jamal's voice echoed through the speakers. "It's my bike. Please." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Lena wiped her eyes, her hands trembling. Jamal stood straighter, as if the video reminded him why he was fighting. The trial stretched into the afternoon, each side digging in. Wells called Hargrove to the stand, the officer's testimony polished but cold. "I acted to protect the community," he said, avoiding Jamal's gaze. "The boy was uncooperative, aggressive." Sarah cross-examined, her questions sharp. "Did you ask for proof of ownership? Did you listen when he said the bike was his?" Hargrove's answers were evasive, his confidence cracking. Then Jamal took the stand. The room stilled again, every eye on him. Sarah asked softly, "Jamal, tell us what happened." He recounted the day, the library trip, the sudden stop, the fear as Hargrove loomed over him. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said. "But he didn't believe me. Nobody did." His voice broke on the last word, and Lena pressed a hand to her mouth. The judge leaned forward. "And those 3 words, Jamal, why say them now?" Jamal looked up, his eyes fierce. "Because I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of people thinking I'm less. I'm enough just like anybody else. The words landed like a thunderclap. The gallery erupted, some cheering, others shouting in protest. Grayson's gavel slammed again, but his eyes stayed on Jamal. For the first time, the judge's stern facade softened, just a fraction. As the trial adjourned for the day, the town buzzed with debate. Outside, protesters clashed, signs waving, voices hoarse. Lena pulled Jamal close, whispering, "You did good, baby." But the fight was far from over. Wells was already planning his next move, and Hargrove's supporters were rallying. Willow Creek stood at a crossroads, and Jamal's 3 words had lit the fuse. The second day of the trial dawned heavy with expectation. Willow Creek's courthouse square was a sea of signs and shouts. The East Side's justice for Jamal banners clashing with the West Side's support our police placards. Inside, the courtroom felt like a powder keg, every glance charged with unspoken accusations. Jamal sat beside his mother, Lena. His small hands folded but his eyes burning with the same fire that had carried him through yesterday's testimony. His 3 words, "I am enough," had become a rallying cry for some and a provocation for others. Today, the town would see which side the scales of justice would tip toward. Judge Harold Grayson took his seat, his face a mask of impartiality, though the lines around his eyes betrayed sleepless nights. He'd spent hours reviewing the case, the viral video, and Officer Hargrove's record. The complaints Sarah had mentioned 3 instances of excessive force, all against black residents, gnawed at him. Grayson had grown up in Willow Creek, had seen its divisions fester like an untended wound. He knew this trial was more than a case. It was a reckoning. Sarah Coleman, the defense lawyer, called her first witness. Mrs. Clara Thompson, a retired librarian who'd known Jamal since he was a toddler. Clara, a frail woman with a voice like steel, recounted how Jamal came to the library every Saturday, devouring books about astronauts and inventors. "That boy's got a mind brighter than most," she said, glaring at the prosecutor, Richard Wells. "He wasn't stealing anything. He was dreaming." Her words stirred the East Side supporters, their nods a quiet chorus of agreement. Wells countered with a witness of his own, Mrs. Evelyn Harper, a West Side resident who'd called the police that day. Evelyn, prim in a pearl necklace, claimed she'd seen Jamal lurking near her neighbor's house. "It looked suspicious," she said, her voice trembling with practiced indignation. "I felt unsafe." Sarah's cross-examination was surgical. "Mrs. Harper, did you see Jamal commit a crime? Or did you just see a black boy in your neighborhood?" Evelyn faltered, her cheeks flushing, but the damage was done. The West Side nodded approvingly, while the East Side seethed. The tension escalated when Sarah called a surprise witness. Marcus Tate, a black teenager who'd been arrested by Hargrove 2 years prior under similar circumstances. Marcus, now 17, spoke of being profiled while walking home from basketball practice, his story eerily parallel to Jamal's. "He didn't ask questions," Marcus said, his voice low but steady. "He just assumed I was trouble." Wells objected, calling the testimony irrelevant, but Grayson overruled. The judge's eyes lingered on Marcus, then flicked to Hargrove, who sat stone-faced in the gallery. As the day wore on, the evidence mounted. Sarah presented character references from Jamal's teachers, neighbors, and even the pastor of their church, all testifying to his kindness and honesty. She showed receipts proving Lena had bought the bike, dismantling Wells' narrative of theft. But Wells was relentless, painting Jamal as a symbol of disorder, a kid whose defiance threatened the town's fragile peace. "If we let this go," he warned the judge, "we're telling every kid they can challenge authority without consequence." Lena took the stand late in the day, her voice a mix of exhaustion and resolve. She spoke of raising Jamal alone, of teaching him to navigate a world that often saw him as a threat. "I told him to be proud, to be kind, to be enough," she said, her eyes locked on her son. "But I never thought I'd have to teach him how to survive a system that's already judged him." Her words hung in the air, and even Wells seemed momentarily silenced. A woman in the gallery sobbed quietly, her hands clutching a tissue. The trial's climax came when Jamal was recalled to the stand. Sarah asked him to explain what "I am enough" meant to him. He took a deep breath, his voice steady despite the weight of every eye on him. "It means I don't have to prove I belong. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be a kid who loves books, who helps his mom, who wants to be an astronaut someday." He paused, looking at the judge. "But people like Officer Hargrove, they don't see me. They see what they want to see." The courtroom was silent, the air thick with the truth of his words. Even Grayson, usually stoic, leaned forward, his hands clasped. Wells tried to counter, pressing Jamal on his resistance during the arrest, but the boy's honesty disarmed him. "I was scared," Jamal admitted. "I didn't know what he'd do, but I wasn't gonna let him make me feel like nothing." Closing arguments were a battle of ideals. Wells leaned hard into fear, warning that acquitting Jamal would undermine law and order. He spoke of Hargrove's service, of the need to protect Willow Creek from chaos. Sarah, in contrast, framed the case as a chance for redemption. "This isn't just about Jamal," she said, her voice rising. "It's about whether this town will choose justice over prejudice, truth over fear. Jamal Carter is enough. Let him be a child, not a scapegoat." Grayson adjourned the court to deliberate, and the wait was agonizing. Outside, the protests grew louder, police forming a thin line between clashing groups. Lena and Jamal sat in a quiet corner of the courthouse, her arm around him. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "you spoke your truth." Jamal nodded, but his eyes were distant, as if he could already feel the weight of the town's judgment. When Grayson returned, the courtroom filled instantly, the air electric. He cleared his throat, his voice steady but heavy. "This case has exposed a wound in Willow Creek, one that's bled for too long. I've reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, the video. Officer Hargrove's actions were not justified. The charges against Jamal Carter are dismissed." The room erupted. East Side supporters cheered, hugging one another, while West Side residents muttered, some storming out. Hargrove's face was a mask of fury, but he said nothing. Wells shook his head, already planning an appeal. But Jamal, standing beside Lena, smiled a small, quiet victory. Grayson wasn't done. "This court recommends an investigation into Officer Hargrove's conduct," he said, his eyes sweeping the room. "And to the people of Willow Creek, I say this: we cannot heal what we refuse to see. This boy's words, 'I am enough,' are a challenge to us all. Let's answer it." The aftermath was messy but hopeful. The investigation into Hargrove led to his suspension, sparking outrage from his supporters, but relief from those who'd long feared him. The town council, pressured by protests, agreed to community forums to address racial divides. Lena and Jamal became reluctant symbols, their story shared across the country, inspiring some, enraging others. Jamal returned to school, his bike repaired, his head high. He still dreamed of the stars, but now he knew his voice could reach them. Lena, too, found strength. She joined the forums, speaking out for change, her love for Jamal fueling her courage. Sarah, hailed as a hero, stayed in Willow Creek, taking on more cases like Jamal's. And Grayson, nearing retirement, wrote a letter to the local paper, urging the town to listen to its youth. "They see what we've ignored," he wrote. "Let's not fail them again." Months later, Jamal stood at the library, a new book in hand. The town was still divided, but cracks of hope had begun to show, neighbors talking across fences, kids from both sides playing together. Jamal's 3 words had done more than win a trial. They'd planted a seed. Willow Creek wasn't healed, but it was waking up. What do you think, was justice served? Or is the fight just beginning? Share your thoughts on where right and wrong lie in this town story, and how communities can bridge their divides.